to go on strike. That's when the strike spread to other areas outside Rustenburg. Eventually the strike ended, they made a settlement, then management said to them, you need to get a union. They agreed as workers, they needed to join a union or come up with a new union, and they decided that they would join AMCU. But the norms and values of the Workers' Committee who has joined AMCU, at least parts of it, still remain. The values around forging unity and militancy outside of the normal collective bargaining structures.
Thank you very much, Luke. It was quite uncanny listening to you, because 40 years ago we were trying to explain the rise of the Durban strikes, a mass strike where there were no unions. And people said it was spontaneous. And we said, hang on a second, there's no such thing as pure spontaneity. There must have been informal networks that mobilized. And I think that what Lucas has brought out here are those informal structures that exist within the working class. But in fact, that's the theme of all three presentations. All three presentations really get to the heart of a universal feature of the labour movement, and that's the tension between the workplace, the workers, and the officials, the union. It's an ongoing tension, and it expressed itself in each of the papers in different ways. Let me open it to the House. I'm going to take three questions, if you're not speeches, questions. So I want to, because we've actually got something unique here. We've got 40 minutes to allow them to discuss, and I want to give them an opportunity to respond. Three questions. The gentleman at the back, right at the back. I'll call you Comrade 1. Comrade 1, and then Comrade 2, and then Comrade 3. One question, 1 minute.
Comrade Chair, I have a comment. My name is David. I'm from Mapubugo Institute. I just want to say that I think we need to take the language example further and interpret it further. I think it actually shows the continuity of coloniality in the mining sector, in the sense that the continuity and entrenchment of Fanagalo is a deliberate, systemic and structural attempt to continue to degrade, undermine, and even destroy cultures, values, and cultural systems and manner of communications of other groups, and in this case, black people in particular.
Thank you. Excellent comment.
And I think that the question that should arise out of that is, what is it that needs to be done to ensure that we humanize or we rehumanize the working environment in the mining sector, to ensure that we affirm languages that have been destroyed in the past, because that's the intention, to continue to destroy languages of other people.
Excellent comment. Thank you. Comrade 2? Yeah.
Thank you very much for interesting papers that have been presented. But what puzzles me in the presentations is the fact that the root cause of the Marikana massacres does not really come out, because from my kindergarten understanding of the issues is that the issue was about the huge salary disparity that exists.
The language issue. Because I think it takes the conversation to a different level from what we've had so far, although we don't have time to go into that. The other issue that you've touched on, which also raises a number of issues that again have not really been spoken about here, is the imagery and and the symbolism of Muti. And the way in which Muti has been spoken about, the use of Muti has been spoken about or not spoken about, and how that contributes to older narratives from Ndabelanga 1923, Muza in Pondoland, to today, the language in which mine workers are spoken about and are spoken of, whether in academia or in public media, remains the same. And that non-interrogation of Muti is for me one of the critical areas around which we still need to have a conversation. Now, you said your PhD research is continuing. I hope you touch on this, and I hope we can have a conversation.
Thank you for that useful comment. I'd like to have a dialogue, so I want to stop with these three questions and allow three quick responses.
I think the question of wage disparities is an extremely interesting and very important one. But I think it also represents real problems with regard to the platinum industry. There's no central bargaining unit. People, I'm astonished coming from Go at how much discretion mine managers in platinum have about wages. So that the wage disparity question is, it seems to me, clearly related to the fact that people out of work look at each other's wage slips. They hear rumors and they operate in accordance with real differences that exist because the different mining houses are competing with one another for workers.
Okay. Yes, I'll pick up on the issue of language. Yes, what my empirical evidence has indicated, highlighted to me is the fact that this variation in terms of what this language may mean. I don't disagree with the fact that, of course, Fanakalo may be sort of like an indicator of the continuity in terms of colonialism. But the fact of the matter is, the workers on the ground, they don't see it in that light, they see it differently. They see it, they've sort of like appropriated this very same language that the MUM sees as something that is a language of suppression, which was made to denigrate black people. The workers have appropriated it as a language of struggle, as a language of hard work, as a language that speaks to their cause. This is what my empirical evidence is sort of is telling me. Then the question of Muti, the way I see it as, by the way, coming from Zimbabwe, it's also very, the issue we have also had, especially look at coming from Zimbabwe, where there is a very hard, sort of, in terms of issues of Sangoma, Muti played a very significant role in the struggle for independence in Zimbabwe. And even now, there's a heraldry, why Mugabe is still there, a lot of Zimbabweans believe is because it's there because of Amagozi and so forth. So I try to interrogate it from that, coming from that perspective, given where it comes from. So I try to engage it, not to see it as something that is a pangan, something that is it's backward, something that is. So I try to understand it as just as any other form of religion, like Christianity or Islam, whatever different forms of religion, where workers resort to this when they are facing a crisis. They want explanation in terms of maybe the challenges that they'll be facing at workplace and at home, and they resort to the use of Sangoma and Muti, which in the mining sector, in the mining industry, is a daily reality for the workers in the mining industry.
That's a fascinating answer. Thank you, Crispin. Luke?
I'll just respond briefly to the gentleman over here. You were asking about the root cause of the Marikana massacre. I think people will speak about that. But then you mentioned the huge salary disparity, and you asked, could lawmen afford it? And yesterday, a lot of the presenters were saying, yes, lawmen can afford it. I think someone even said lawmen can afford to pay $20,000 for the mine workers per month. But you're talking about the cause and then saying, the huge salary disparity, what's the cause of the massacre? But the decision was basically they killed people. I mean, the assumption is that you kill people if their demands are too great and you can't meet their demands. They're demanding 12,500. Whether or not you can meet the demand, and then the police, the government intervene and respond to kill the workers on behalf of lawmen.
Thanks, Luke. Okay, we'll take one more round of what assembly here, Gavin, and Comrade Eddie at the back from NUM. Yeah. I think we start with assembly.
Thanks. Very quick questions. Thank you very much for the presentations. Luke, I was wondering about the relationships between these worker committees you're talking about and the AMCU, especially after the massacre. That's the first question. And then to Crispin, you talked about, Crispin, about the mobilizations beyond the workplace. And I was wondering about the gendered nature of these mobilization processes and how they exclude certain people while they go beyond the workplace. There's still people within the workplace who are excluded from these processes. And then the last one, again to you, Crispin, is about violence. You talk about violence as means of forging solidarities. And again, I was wondering if there's a different way of looking at violence, maybe as a violence as doing the opposite of forging solidarities. Violence may be polarizing the workforce. And I'm thinking in particular about women in mining who've often said, well, the reason a lot of times we don't go to strikes is because they become so violent. And since we are seen as the other in mining after the Amagundwane, we become the targets. So I'm wondering if there's other ways of looking at violence besides violence being a means of forging solidarities.
Yeah.
Three valuable papers and a question to all of them. But first, the root causes of the massacre. Well, insofar as we're talking about the murder of mine workers by the police, the root causes whoever gave the order to kill. And mine was the order to kill given by the state because it wanted to smash a strike which had begun actually not at Longmin, but which had begun at Impala and spread through the Platinum Belt, was rocking through the most strategic mining industry in New South Africa, and had all kinds of ramifications. So the order came from the state and it came to kill, and that's where we had to locate it. But the question is this, in terms of the frameworks, as far as they've been set out, and in terms of the language which has also been used, what one word or one concept seems to be missing to me, a concept which is critical to trade unionism in general and to the situation we're trying to analyse in particular, and that's the concept of bureaucratisation. The process of the emergence of a trade union bureaucracy which balances between capital and labour, whose job is to haggle over the price of labour power, and that in the process of doing so actually comes to occupy quite a specific social position, and indeed in doing so can develop interests of its own. The preservation of the union, its ability to prove to management that it can sit down and that it can speak their language in the boardroom and that it can negotiate, and having to do the same thing to the workers as well. In other words, a distinctive social layer which actually quite often develops lifestyles and privileges and everything else which pulls it away from the rank and file, and which can be pulled in one direction and can be pulled on the other. I'm speaking at the level of generality. I would like to hear now in terms of the specifics how that may or may not have manifested in the situations you're describing.
Thank you, Comrade Eddie.
Thank you, Chair. Look, we accept, some of the issues that have been raised here. They're not new, especially Professor Moody, and some issues that have been raised here. We have accepted them long before and have responded to them in some areas. To your question, Comrade Eddie, to say why did not implement SWOP recommendation? We did. 2001, for example, we came up with something called 10 dimensions for party service. It was part of responding to 1998-99 SWOP process, for example. But let me touch on one or two issues here. I think just to Crispin, there are serious gaps, Chief, in your paper. Serious gaps, and I'm going to give one or two examples. In your paper, you are saying Stephen McWade, the one who was shot, was either suspended by NUM because of financial management or so on and so on. That's not true. Wherever we got that information, that's not true. All we know, which is a fact, is that is because he did not want to participate in a branch conference where democratic process should take place. So he was autocratic, he did not want to be removed by democratic processes. The second issue that I want to, as a gap from you, is to say that the two parties use violence. In your paper, you said both parties, NUM and AMP, use violence. I challenge you to go to the police stations, right, and check the facts. Which are the people who are more suspect in the violence there? And I'll leave it with you. The challenge for you that you must check. The third issue I want to raise it. Can I protect it?
One person, one question.
Yeah. Can I just raise this last issues here? To say, I think the challenge that is facing SWOP today, and you researchers here, not critical. You say the police must police the police. We are also analyzing SWOP. It's very critical. It's important. We must analyze SWOP. How it was work. Because SWOP must not be hijacked by either the extreme right or extreme left. SWOP is a very important organization. The point I want to raise here is that there are political parties that has emerged in your Marikana area. Did the researchers link this to any spontaneous activities there in terms of violence, in terms of workers' committees and so on and so on? For example, all of a sudden you are having UDM was there, APC is there, you are having EEF is there, Workers' Social Party is there. Is this what are the characteristics? Because I think this one, there's a person this morning who spoke about the political situation. How are we linking all these things? Because we are not isolated. From where we stand, they're not isolated. We think the issue here is that we have to understand what I did, the root cause of that thing that person is saying. Collective bargaining, lastly, collective bargaining, you must assist us. Because someone spoke about inequality and so on and so on, the wage gaps. Researchers must tell us, is the current collective bargaining not working? And if it's not working, what are the issues about it? Instead of just attacking and so on, what are the issues about current collective bargaining? Thank you.
Thank you, Comrade Eddie. Would like to open up on you.
So you're in the firing line. You have time to prepare.
It seems to me that the problem in the Rustenburg branch of the NUM is not bureaucratization, it's fragmentation. It's political infighting. That's my understanding of where the problem arose. It didn't arise, in my opinion, because of a particularly bureaucratic organization. In fact, I'm not at all sure that the regional office in Rustenburg was particularly bureaucratic at all. In terms of, and that feeds into this question of the 10 dimensions. 10 dimensions of satisfaction were surveyed in the 2010 SWOP survey. Rustenburg scored bottom on every single one of the 10 dimensions. So there's a problem in Rustenburg, it seems to me, that needs to be recognized as an issue. And then finally this question of violence, which I actually do deal with in the paper that I wrote, but which I think needs to be, I need at least to address. And the link between violence and politics. The NUM on Impala in 1992 was violent. 1991 was violent. NUM or ANC marshals were bringing politics into union operations. When politics and worker interests get combined in various sorts of ways, it is incendiary. And unfortunately, you get violence. But violence is not restricted to one party. Although now that once the NUM became well established, the violence decreased from NUM point of view. With Makepeace Workers Union, it was largely NUM people who were being targeted. But violence is part of the scene, and one has to recognize that.
Okay, thank you. I'll start off with Asanda on violence as a means of forging solidarity. I think maybe I didn't highlight the fact that violence is a phenomenon, somehow an ambiguous phenomenon. You know, on one hand, yes, I agree, it sort of polarizes the workers, divides the workers, but at the same time, on another hand, it also unites the workers. It sort of builds a worker collective. So it's a matter of depending on what side of this, of the mountain where you stand. For some, it's also a means of, it's a means of uniting. When you are so fragmented, there's no another way. How do you attain solidarity? You can attain it through the use of violence. This is what I've observed in the case of the strike. But at the same time, I do agree it also divides the workers, polarized. Then I move on to Comrade Eddie. In terms of, I'll start off with the issue around which of the groups, AMCO or NEM, in terms of the violence. I would say, in terms of what I'm referring to, I'm not referring to the institutions like AMCO or the NEM in terms of whether they are violent or not, but I'm referring to different groups of workers that I interacted with, that I've interviewed. They did confirm to me that sometimes violence is a necessary strategy. That's why I've gone to the extent of even interviewing some of the mine workers who wanted to go to work and they were in a way become victim of the violence which happened during the strike. And a lot of them, they also feel that the use of violence in the strike it's a justified strategy, but they simply because of, from my interviews, I lived in Rustenburg for 14 months, and in terms of the method where I got my information, and I did interacted and interviewed people from the NUM, people from AMCO, people who are non-union members, people from management, and I was really on the ground when the strike started and right up to the end of January 2012. I was on the ground, and I have some people here who can confirm who were part of the strike, were active in the strike. I interviewed, for example, the regional NUM, the chairperson, it's Comrade Steti in Rustenburg. I interviewed AMCO, the five Madoda at Impala. So this is how far in terms of how I collected the data. Then in terms of the issue around Comrade Steve, I would like Comrade Eddie to take note that they are contesting from the evidence that I've collected from my research. They are contesting. So there are two contesting perspectives in terms of how Steve left the NUM. I do agree that maybe in the report I missed the fact that there is one perspective which says he was because of he didn't want to stand for an election. But at the same time, the workers that I interviewed, the workers that I interacted, they also indicated to me that the reason why he was dismissed from the NUM is because of the fact that he had exposed corruption within the union. So those are two contesting perspectives. The NUM perspective, then there's another contesting perspective which is coming from work. So I take note of the other perspective. And please, this is just work in progress. All this, it will be addressed in the final paper.
I'll just respond quickly to Asanda, quickly because we don't have that much time. She basically asked what's now the relationship between the Workers' Committee and AMCU. And I'll just talk about AMPLATS, although you could ask me about Longman. And basically, it's a relationship that's in flux, but the strike committee basically says during the day we're AMCU, at night we're the workers' committee. And obviously the workers' committee is more radical and more directly linked to the workers. There's also forces, independent forces, even though they're small, like Democratic Socialist Movement and Democratic Left Front, that promote independent organizations which also have a hand in shaping, even if in small ways, the strike committees and AMCU.
Right. Thank you. I think we can have one more round again. We've got the comrade from the Kingdom of Lesotho. first. Then we've got Jane Barrett, and I've got the gentleman right at the back. Now, if you guys are quick, then we can actually have another round. So,
Thank you. Is it on?
yeah, one comrade, one question. Yeah.
One question, one comment, one answer. Thank you, Chairperson. I've known situations where marriages, where a man and a woman have separated because of muti and sangomas. Now, I didn't get clearly what you said about this, because I think we have different beliefs. Some are for muti, some are against. So I didn't get actually what you were saying. Did all the workers agree that they are going to go for sangomas and use the muti?
Okay.
The other thing is, yes, was it used for protection? Was it used for togetherness or for solidarity? And I just want to say to my comrades here, we should have learned, I'm from the trade unions, we should have learned, and we should actually from here know our position when we are saying we are going to represent workers. We have had killings because we were not servicing our membership. Let's go back and service our membership. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Jane Barrett from COSATU. I've got a question stroke comment to Luke. When he started off, he referred to the strike committee or to the workers committee as a new form of organisation. And I'm uncomfortable with that reference or that description. I mean, maybe it'll become something new, but certainly history tells us, and I guess Eddie made reference to it, that in our context, where our labour laws don't prevent scab labour, they don't prevent replacement labour, there's not a single, certainly big strike that occurs where strike committee and underground strike committee doesn't exist. The fact that they're not documented is because they're so very, very secret. But I mean, I think in all of the past mining strikes, and certainly in the big Transnet strike, in the security workers strike, all the big strikes that you can think of in the last decades, there will have been an underground strike committee that emerges in the context of the strike, is secret, the officials don't know who those people are. They do basically the disciplining work in the strike. And that's precisely about the fact that the workers recognize that there is a disproportionate power that capital holds, and that in a strike situation it's the one opportunity to try and redress that imbalance. But there's no restraint on the employer from employing replacement labour, from employing scabs. And so it becomes the task of the strike committee primarily to ensure that you don't have scab labour, and that's a constant. And with this reference to violence, particularly in strikes, until such time as there is some restriction on the right of employers to employ replacement labour, there will be the emergence of these committees in strike situations. And I'm just wondering what it was about the strike committees that you refer to, Luke, that leads you to describe them as new forms of organisation rather than a constant and something of continuity from the past.
Thank you, Jane. It's worth recalling that there was a big debate in 1995 in the Labour Relations Act to ban what they called replacement labour, scab labour. It was a strong demand from COSATU, which we lost. Yeah.
Thank you. My question is: Marikana a symptomatic manifestation of the shambolic nature of global capitalism and its failure to deliver in the modern day world? Because all over the world we are seeing protests, whether workers' protests, whether mass protests, whether community protests. So what does Marikana hold? Is it just an isolated incident, or it shows that it's time to challenge global capitalism and probably reform it or replace it?
Right, guys. You want to go this time, Luke?
Thanks for that very useful comment, Jane.
Yeah, when I was interviewing Sabay from the DSM, he actually made that same point. He said always when there's a strike, you'll have some kind of a strike committee or workers committee. And I think it's a broader question to the panel and to us, because we're talking about the 2012 strike wave, and we can see a break with the past. And it's a result of workers' independent mobilization, and also, you know, their ability to mobilize large numbers of people and represent a significant number of workers. So it's a question, you know, is it new forms? The